For Sunday, December 21st, you found the Georgia Gang. Topping our agenda today, we begin with the new home of the Braves. Has anybody got a place to park? Our schools across the state are slipping in performance, and we've got some interesting numbers about voter turnout in the recent elections. Those are some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia Gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
And we're glad you'll be with us on this Sunday. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. Hanukkah continues, I guess, until the end of the week, and then later this week it is Merry Christmas to all. I'm not ready. Phil's not ready. You're ready.
I'm ready.
You ready?
No.
Not even close.
No. Still working.
Well, it's. See, the difference is we're guys.
Well, the difference is, too, I shop online.
Well,
you don't have to go anywhere.
No sales tax.
Well, yes, you do now. They have started including it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, let's begin with what passes for news, but I do think it is news, and that is the fact that the Braves have got parking problems with that new stadium planned for Cobb County, or under construction in Cobb County. The Braves bought 9.5 acres, the headquarters building of Genuine Parts, and it can hold 1,100 parking spaces. That's what they decide to do with it. But in the meantime, Cumberland Mall, which I thought was part of the whole deal to move the Braves to Cobb County, Cumberland Mall said, Jeff, you're not parking on our lot.
Well, I don't blame them. I mean, they've got their own problems already.
Yeah, but those are customers.
But, you know, the real problem for me here is the surface parking. Are they going to do out there in Cobb what they did downtown and have acres and acres of surface parking everywhere? I mean, it's just, it's so old school. It's so 20th century. No, we need to find some other alternatives, either getting people there or some other parking alternatives.
Jeff, I've got it.
A parking deck?
Maybe.
There you go.
Hey, Jeff, maybe the Atlanta streetcar will be running by 2017.
Oh, dear.
Could take people right up to Cobb County.
Well, you know, I mean, some transit wouldn't be a bad idea at all. We even have Republicans in the General Assembly talking about, you know, mentioning the T word. We talked about it last week. So, yes, some sort of transit would be very helpful.
Well, Alexis is right. I think a parking deck would be a great thing. And what bothers me is that there's still a lack of transparency. The Braves and Cobb County are not really saying what these plans are going to be, to your point.
Well, I think it's because they don't know what the plans are going to be. They seem to be making it up as they go, and they certainly didn't involve the folks at the Cumberland Mall because they were astounded when they saw the plan.
I think you're right. I think truly they're working out the parking as they move along. But if I were, I think it's Simon Properties owns Cumberland Mall, I would welcome the Braves traffic as customers.
Well, yeah, but the other customers can't park.
What do you mean? They're
when
not
they,
there to
if
buy
they
a
park, come and
toaster. They're
stay.
there to see a ball game.
Yeah, but they might buy a toaster after the game.
No way.
No.
Because they're closed after
You don't
the
think
game.
so?
No, that's
They're
Everybody's
supposed to
gone home.
buy a drink.
bad idea.
Yeah.
At any rate, the complex is exciting. We've talked about this last week. I mean, the drawings they've released, it really is exciting. But that it is kind of surprising to realize they haven't figured out the parking yet. I think they've figured out the transportation connections. I mean, I think it's going to be easier to get to than
I don't know,
Turner
Dick.
Field.
We still don't know
I
that.
don't know that
I
either.
still see this 10, 15 years from now. It's one of those big boxes that go out and they just leave vacant, you know. And there are strip malls all over metro Atlanta and the nation like that. And it's going to be the same thing with the Braves here and all of their surface parking and their empty stadium.
Now let's change the subject. Let's go down the road about 10 miles. Let's go down the road about 10 miles to a strip mall that is truly vacant. And Kasim Reed dodged a bullet, I think. The mayor of Atlanta was able to sell Underground Atlanta. He sold, somebody bought it, let's put it that way. Developer from South
There's always
Carolina.
a bigger fool.
Do they know what they're getting into?
Yes,
buying
but you know,
absolutely.
it's different. It's different than it was in the late 80s when we were around the corner there on Marietta Street. And the difference is Georgia State
Absolutely.
University. I mean, it's
I
just
agree.
transformed
I
that
agree.
area.
The
And
whole
so
downtown.
this notion that you can have housing there is plausible now because of all of those students downtown at Georgia State.
And I agree with you. A grocery is probably
Yes,
Right.
exactly right.
the right thing for that.
Yes.
I agree, and I'm trying to be optimistic, but I'm going to give you the other side of the coin because I just saw the FBI crime statistics for Atlanta, and they're not good.
Oh, look,
crime is
way
up.
down
Jeff,
in
no.
cities across America, including this one.
No.
Phil, you got to be kidding.
No.
And you haven't been downtown recently. You got to go down
Yeah,
there
I
and see
have.
those 18 and
Yeah, I have.
19-year-olds walking
Walking
around
the
with their
street.
book bags.
Jeff,
Well,
Jeff,
and-
I think I agree with you that is an exciting thing. All I'm saying to you is I'm going to show you a copy of the FBI crime statistics: murder, rape, and larceny.
I'm going to tell you what,
as
an entertainment
did you hear what I
district,
said?
I hear what you're saying, but as
Okay.
an entertainment district, clearly those days are over. As a residential center for students, I mean, they're spread out all over downtown. They're going to the Brave Stadium. That's where they're now parking at the Brave Stadium and shuttling over to classes at Georgia State. The south side of downtown has been taken over by Georgia State University,
Yes.
and it's a very good thing.
But they need to have good law enforcement, is
Well,
all I'm
Kasim
saying.
Reed, the mayor, did make the right noises at the press conference announcing the sale of Underground. And he spoke out quite strongly against panhandling. Now, every mayor I've ever known in Atlanta has spoken out against panhandling and done nothing about it. But I think if Underground is going to work, those things like panhandling and shakedowns and all that
I was
have
glad to
got
hear
to be
him.
handled.
I was glad to hear him say that. And you know, there's been a dispute. They're not enforcing the current panhandling ordinance, and some critics say, okay, it's too weak, we need to do it. Well, then City Council needs to strengthen
You
it.
know,
and
one more
enforce
thing, I
it.
think that the mayor's administration needs to be given credit for what they're doing. They're selling off this real estate and getting these things off the books. This is $8 million off the books for the
Each
city
year.
of Atlanta every year.
Yes.
That's exactly right. It's a big deal. Those are going to be, that's going to be used so that once it's off the books, you'll be able to fund this infrastructure.
Right.
$1 billion in infrastructure improvements.
Mayor Reed could take the $8 million, think what he could do in terms of unpaid vacation, medical leave for top-ranking city employees. He could give them all with that $8 million a year in savings. These huge bonuses, which
We
in
know
turn
exactly
drive
what
up
we're
their
going to do
pensions.
with that, with the Civic Center, the sale of the Civic Center and other surplus
Turner
property in
Field.
the city, and Turner Field,
Right.
exactly right, and other surplus property in the city. We're going to finance that $1 billion a year in infrastructure
And
improvement.
And does he do that in
And it's a good thing.
March or April? Is that on the ballot in Atlanta that we have
It is in March.
a sales tax for infrastructure? Is that the idea?
I don't know if that's going to happen.
That's what he seems to be pointing
That seems
toward.
where he's headed. But the other thing I was going to say, too, with 30,000 students at Georgia State University, they're going to take over the downtown with this new development. And there won't be any room for panhandling and crime. There just won't be
Well,
any
let's
room
hope they
for 'em.
crack down.
Well, that's the dream, and there's no question. But Georgia State is the savior of downtown Atlanta. There's no question.
No question.
And if they do complete the purchase of Turner Field, and do some real development around there, that opens up a whole new vista. In my experience in Atlanta, you know, you could actually walk without fear all the way to Turner Field.
Which is why the Braves moved to Cobb County.
Yes, exactly. Well, and of
No,
course,
that's
remember,
not why they moved.
No, I
Because
don't think
they
that's why
moved
they
because
moved
they
to
couldn't
Cobb
do any ancillary development. They wanted to build a hotel
Even
and
the
all those
AJC
shops.
interviewed people around there.
Well-
Now,
They
this-
had to have
But don't
better
worry,
law
they'll be moving
enforcement.
back.
this past week, Kasim Reed took a shot from a coalition of parents groups who want the city to pay their debt on the tax abatement for the Beltline to the Atlanta Public Schools. And boy, the mayor is feisty and combative about this, but the city owes the money. What's the issue?
Well, you know, it's really, really complicated, and
No, it isn't.
it is complicated, Dick, because it gets down to whether or not the you know, in the intergovernmental agreement, the hard amounts are really what they were after. It was 5% of the tax increment that APS was supposed to get, and they wrote into there these pilots, these payments in lieu of taxes, as hard amounts instead of as 5%. Well, after the recession, you know, you had a projection that you'd have $3 billion in revenue, and now it's down to a third of that. And it just seems that if you're going to stick with the 5%, you stick with the 5%. So it is a complicated issue, and
But a
you know, it's
contract
something that
is a
needs to be.
contract.
Well,
Oh,
there's
wait a
disagreement
minute now.
about the
If
amount.
It's a contract.
if you say that you're going to get 5% of the proceeds, and the proceeds go down by a third, you should still get 5% of the proceeds. You know, to say a
Well-
contract is a contract, and then to go out and essentially bankrupt the Beltline, which is going to generate all of
Well,
this economic development for everybody, including
the mayor's being
APS.
intransigent with the school system.
We gotta
Would you
get out.
admit that?
I think that everybody needs to get back to the negotiating table and recognize
think
the
they
fact
are.
that we no longer
Well,
have $3 billion
They've been
in
trying to do
projections
that,
coming out of
but
there.
the mayor's
Right.
not bending.
Well, enough. We've run out of time on that. When we come back, a rare shout out to the Atlanta Police and a look at tumbling school scores. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at myfoxatlanta.com.
We in the press are sometimes critical of the police. It's even been known to occur here on the Georgia Gang, but I thought it was interesting this week that the Atlanta police, in cooperation with the MARTA police, were able to quickly arrest a serial killer. I think the police deserve a little praise for that work, and I also thought it was unusual that it was an old-fashioned practice. It doesn't happen much in modern times, where a homicide detective goes public and goes before the press and the TV cameras and shows you the revolver that they thought was involved and the kind of ammunition it used. Very open, very, to use the current buzzword, transparent.
Well,
and
that's
it
right.
worked because the MARTA police caught the guy jumping the fair
And
gate.
you know, that's the way law enforcement should work around the country. Some critics say, oh, why are we bothering with this small-time enforcement with parking tickets or jumpers at MARTA? Well, this is how you enforce the law and you catch people like this animal.
Yeah, who we just say for the record, I don't want to call his name because I think that's what he wants, but he killed 2 homeless men downtown, a woman indicator right in the middle of a street, and
Definitely a
apparently
sick
just
individual.
had not much remorse or anything. But just a shout out to the police, interagency cooperation, the whole thing.
And how about one more shout out? The Santa cops, some members of the Atlanta Police Department took some underprivileged children shopping for their families, and they took them around to, I think it was the Atlantic Station Target store, so they could buy gifts for their families.
Did the
Very
same thing
nice.
in Dunwoody, absolutely.
Very nice.
Most police forces do something like that, and that's good. All right, Fulton County has not really been front and center lately, but all of a sudden there's noise. There's noise of another tax increase, Phil, is that right?
Well, that's right.
17% in the current budget.
That's right. You remember we had the fight over this 17% tax increase. Some say it's illegal. John Eves and a majority of the commission right now say we're going ahead with it. You've always made the point, and I've always agreed with you, that why are we looking at tax hikes when the services ought to be lowered with all of the new cities in Fulton
That's
County?
right. Makes no sense.
Because they've got less revenue and they have the same responsibility.
They're trying to
state
boost-
law.
they're trying
they
to
still
burst-
have to,
Why
they
don't
still
you
have to
read-
run the courts so that your clients can go down there and
Read the
sue
budget.
each other.
Read the budget. Read the Fulton County budget. I dare you. They're trying to expand social services, which we don't really need expanding. There's a second point too, and that is, did you all see the story on the millions that were wasted in the Fulton IT department? It's almost as bad as the Obamacare website debacle.
You know, in years of covering local government, I think that one of the worst places to snoop is in the IT departments. We've seen that in DeKalb County, Jeff. We saw all those emergency contracts. Now Fulton County. Now in Fulton County, I don't think, Phil, there's any allegation of illegal behavior.
I think it's stupidity.
Oh.
No.
Well, they don't know what they're doing, and if you saw that story that the auditors brought out, we wouldn't have needed, Jeff, a tax increase if we could have saved all that wasted money.
Maybe it's
Well-
because I'm in a Christmas mood, but I'm also going to put a little praise on Lee May, the interim CEO of DeKalb County, who delivered a level budget to the commission. Don't know what they'll do with it, but the budget has no tax increases. And also, contrary to the current tides that run, DeKalb County, under Lee May, hired a bunch of extra people for the Watershed Management Department, and they've reduced call times to like 1 minute from 20-minute wait times, just by adding a few bodies to the problem. And so I think they deserve some credit for that. And given the general turmoil the county is in, progress is progress. That's to be saluted, I think. Don't you, Jeff?
Well, I'll tell you, yeah, absolutely. And we got some more good news out of DeKalb when Larry Johnson, the commissioner there, was exonerated by the ethics board, said he'd done nothing wrong. Actually, he made some contributions to the Porter Sanford Performing Arts Center. That's not like Elaine Boyer, who was putting money in her own pocket and is on her way to prison.
Yeah, but it's wrong. I'm not buying that. Right, Elaine Boyer was criminal activity. Larry Johnson was robbing Peter to pay Paul. He was taking money out of his county budget and putting it into another county thing so he'd get his name and a portrait on the wall at the Porter
no,
Sanford
I don't think that
Arts
was it
Center.
at all. But the point is that the ethics committee has dismissed those charges because they were baseless, they were groundless.
All right, now here we go again with school scores, and we need to discuss this, but I don't know what to say. We do have a tougher curriculum. We do ask more of students in terms of standardized testing, but Georgia's schools continue to slip, especially in areas like math and algebra and that sort of thing. How long do we just slip? When do we turn it around?
It's frustrating. We've all been frustrated. We've talked about this for years now. We know teachers are frustrated, administrators, they keep changing the standards. We've talked about that. And of course, we can always open up the debate again. I think we need more parental choice. We've got a new school superintendent coming in. We've got a school board, I think, that's committed to
Talking
more.
about Atlanta?
I'm talking about Atlanta and the state.
Well, I thought this story, this report this year made a lot of sense. It's the bottom 25% that seems intractable.
Well,
that's the group of students we're not reaching.
That's the group that we've always
It's
not
always
reached.
been based on socioeconomic indicators. Will show you who's going to do well on a standardized test and who's not. And that seems to be the intractable problem that we've had perennially. And we're always going to have it until we figure out a way to really support children who come from low-income families.
And clearly, I think that's what this new measure intends to do, is to identify those students so that you can begin to give them some extra effort and some extra funding. So we've got to begin to shift funding to those who are the lowest performers so that we can rise all boats.
Okay, we've got to get out. Let's see. This broadcast is the 21st of December. Kasim Reed says the streetcar will be running by December 31st. Start the clock. 10 days for Mayor Reed and that stupid Obama streetcar. All right, when we come back, some talk about the economy and other things.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at myfoxatlanta.com.
Before we turn to politics, a couple of quick economic notes. The state's unemployment rate dropped to 7.2%, still horrible, still embarrassing, but at least it's declining.
Wait a minute, I can't let you get away with that. This is the biggest drop in 38 years. It's the biggest drop in 38 years. We have 4.2 million people employed in the state of Georgia, the most in 7 years. And
Phil,
what number does that coincide
Phil,
with?
go ahead.
That's how long the president's been in office. He's turned this around. Your George Bush trashed our economy, and Barack Obama has actually brought it back. That's what these numbers show.
Are you through? Are you through with this sermon?
Talk about the full employment, Phil.
How long do we have to listen to this garbage?
I want to move on.
We have 99,000 jobs in the last year alone. The national rate is at full employment, 5.8%. They're just numbers. They're facts.
You done?
Face them.
You done?
All right, and
the Democratic Party.
How much for a gallon of gas?
Well, Jeff.
Thanks to fracking.
Oh, thanks to fracking.
Oh, boy.
Jeff, you're full of it like a Christmas turkey.
You like those numbers?
No, he's a turducken.
The Democrat Party is not the friend of the working party.
What happened to the stock market on Thursday?
Oh, my goodness. Record high after record high after record high.
Record underemployment. You never read those stories.
Let's use this as a year-end benchmark, and I thought it was interesting, these various economic surveys, okay? The University of Georgia, the Terry College of Business, projects 3.2% growth in 2015, while Georgia State, which has been doing it, I think, a little longer, projects growth of 2.6%. That's pitiful. It's like 7.2% unemployment. That is pitiful. You can praise Obama all you want.
This is the
but
biggest month-to-month drop in the unemployment rate that we've seen since 1976.
He's been president for 6 years, and if you drill down in that 7.2% unemployment, you find out all the people who are no longer seeking work, and you look at black unemployment and teen black unemployment, and it is scandalous.
Jeff doesn't want to look at that.
We're at the precipice of the great of 1929 repeated in this nation, and now we're at 5.8% unemployment, and you all can't give a Democratic president credit for that?
It's been terrible.
Really?
In fact, we've got
if it was Ronald
Democrats
Reagan, you'd be building statutes in the town.
Can we get in a word edgewise here?
No.
If we had a president that understood job growth and stopped putting regulation after
No,
regulation
the
to stifle.
president-
we got to get out.
It's been the Congress that hasn't supported his
And let me
job
tell you
growth
something, we've got
initiatives.
Democrats in the new Congress. They're going to be voting to open up the Keystone Pipeline and get more jobs. These are
We gotta
Democrats
get out.
supporting Republicans.
Every economist will tell you that full employment is 5%. We are at 5.8%.
Which is mostly what it was.
Which has happened under the administration of Barack Obama.
We got to move quickly.
That's a fact.
One
There
of
you
the
go.
things is that under President George W. Bush, unemployment usually was around 5%, right?
Until the end of it.
Which
Until the very
which
end.
W. Bush?
George W. Bush.
The one who wrecked the American economy?
He was president for 8 years.
All right.
And the other thing is, projecting 3.2% and 2.6% economic growth, Ronald Reagan is spinning his grave.
Well, it's
at what
sad. This is unacceptable. Even with a
what
lot
an
of
unacceptable
Democrats, it's
number that is.
unacceptable.
All right, let's turn to politics. Now, Jeff, you think we've talked about this, but I don't think so. Because
Phil thinks so.
now
Phil
we've got
thinks so.
these,
I don't think
Phil,
so.
you said, we've got the final numbers from the November election in Georgia, and I thought it was very interesting. Black turnout, which we discussed over and over and over again, turned out to be 28%.
Which turned out to be higher than the midterm 2 years ago, but still not high enough.
Right, but remember we talked about the pollsters and how they were figuring some were
Weighting.
using 30% and some and so forth, but it was 28%, and the white turnout was 63%.
Which was also less but higher.
Yes, and the result is the state is not really turning purple.
Nothing changed. In fact, the Democrats...
Unless black turnout gets over
The
30%.
Democrats pumped millions of dollars for the first time into these two campaigns, Senate and Governor. The needle didn't move at all. I was surprised that it was 28. Remember, the pollsters were saying 30.
You know, I mean,
and
you're
all
going to
that.
have to have a reason to bring black voters to the polls. And I don't think that the Democratic candidates gave them a reason. They ran against the
They ran
President of the
away from the
United
president,
States,
yeah.
who has given us, you know, has
7.2% unemployment.
5.8%
Down from
full
10,
employment,
right.
killed Osama bin Laden, killed more terrorists
Obama
than all
said-
presidents
Obama said
combined.
his
We gotta get out.
And
policies
then
were on the
Michelle
line.
Nunn and Carter run away from this president.
You remember
and so
Obama-
what happened?
You remember Obama said, "My policies are on the ballot."
African American voters stayed home.
We gotta
and
get
here's
out.
the thing: if the Democrat running for president does the same thing next year,
Yeah, it's going to happen
they're
too.
going to see the same result.
Right.
So they didn't turn out for a president who sold America out in a deal with communist Cuba. Most scandalous
And you
thing.
know, even Mayor Kasim
not.
Reed,
President
even
Obama.
Mayor
Sold
Kasim
America.
Reed wasn't happy with the Democrat candidates
we
too.
get-
Maybe that
What
might
are
have
you
depressed
saying?
When we
voting.
come back, winners and losers.
Time now for this week's Winners and Losers.
And Jeff, I think I'll start with you for winners and losers.
Well, thank you, Dick. I appreciate that. A couple of things. The West Side Future Fund has been launched. They have a board. They're going to start some improvements over there in West Atlanta. We're also going to have that. The West Side Beltline Trail is on the way, so we're going to see some movement over there, and that's a good thing. You know, you talked about Cuba. I subscribe to a magazine called Cigar Aficionado, and there's a completely different approach there and opinion from yours about whether or not we should still have this embargo. All these years later, it makes absolutely no sense. We do business with communist China. We do business with Russia. We're not going to do business with a country 90 miles away from us. It makes no sense.
Well, it's
Right.
because it's a repressive communist regime.
Congratulations to
the
the
Castro
President of
brothers
the
gave
United
Obama
States.
nothing.
Congratulations to the President of the United States for beginning to normalize relations with Cuba.
And who
It's
got nothing? He
way-
got nothing,
nothing in
in return.
return.
Nothing in
All right,
return.
go ahead.
We're
Phil,
gonna
you're
get a
up.
lot in
All right,
return.
you know, I think we might
Yeah,
all
new place
agree.
to vacation.
I got something we might all agree on. Hey, Jeff, you paying attention? We got something we'll all agree on. The loser is the First Amendment and what Americans can see or not see, and that is when these cowards in Hollywood pulled the movie, The Interview, Sony. And I think that
It's just part of the Obama deal. You surrender, you
I
roll
tell
over.
you what, there's a
You
lot
don't
of
stand for anything.
Korea
You know
was
what?
behind it. What are you talking about?
There's a lot of Hollywood liberals that I'm gonna
and
praise.
besides,
I'm gonna
it was the
praise. Get a
movie
load of
houses
this.
that
George
pulled the
Clooney.
movie.
George Clooney is my winner, a Hollywood liberal. He wants to release the thing now. We're not going to be dictated to by some tin-horn communist dictators. I know
gotta
you
move.
like
I'm with you.
tin-horn
We gotta move.
communist
Oh,
dictators.
Not one bit.
All right, Alexis, what do you have?
Besides Happy Hanukkah and Merry Christmas, I also want to wish happy belated birthday wishes to Mary Mother Hughes. She's a longtime Atlanta public servant and community leader. And she's also recovering from a slight stroke, so we wish her a speedy recovery.
All right. And I will say that we all have to have our fingers crossed today because the Falcons are in an elimination game against the New Orleans Saints. Lose and the season's over, win, and there's still a shot at the playoffs for kind of a woeful team.
Woeful
and
division.
what's the name of the new diversity officer for the Atlanta Hawks?
Oh,
Zinga Shaw. Zinga Shaw.
Zinga Shaw?
I think so.
that's how you say it.
Perfect. Chief Diversity Officer for the Atlanta Hawks. Her first job is so obvious. More white players. And we'll see you next week on the Georgia Gang. Merry Christmas.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing on today's program.